Ladies and gentlemen, imagine for a moment that the only thing standing between you and the life you've always dreamed of is not money, not opportunity, not luck, but the way your mind has been wired. What if I told you that the patterns running your thoughts right now are the chains holding you back, and the second you learn to break them, you unlock a level of power, clarity, and certainty that can transform everything? Tonight, I'm going to show you exactly how one decision to rewire the mind turned a life of limitation into a life of unstoppable possibility, and how you can do the same starting right now. And imagine being at a point in life where everything around you feels limited, where the circumstances you were born into seem to dictate the outcome of your future, where the odds stacked against you appear overwhelming. Most people would surrender to that story. Most people would say that's just the way it is and live the rest of their lives repeating patterns that never lead to anything greater. But what if I told you that your brain is not hardwired to keep you where you are? What if I told you that you can rewire it, literally retrain it to create a life that goes beyond what you ever thought possible? That is exactly what happened when one man made the decision to shift the blueprint of his mind, and in doing so, rewrote the entire direction of his destiny. And the truth is, your mind is the most powerful machine on earth, but most people never read the instruction manual. They run the programs handed down to them, programs of fear, of scarcity, of limitation, and they live in that loop until the day they die. But those programs can be disrupted. They can be replaced. It doesn't matter where you came from, what you've been through, or how impossible the dream looks right now. When you condition your brain to see possibility where others see limitation, to find strength where others see struggle, to chase the vision instead of the excuse, everything changes. And the journey begins with hunger, not just physical hunger, but a hunger for life, a hunger for meaning, a hunger for a better future. When you feel that hunger, it becomes impossible to accept mediocrity. And that hunger was the fire that lit the path. There was no money, no connections, no resources at first. What there was, though, was an obsession with growth, a relentless desire to learn how people succeed, how they think, how they act, how they break through. Books became mentors. Audio programs became lifelines. Every page, every lesson was fuel. He wasn't just learning strategies. He was rewiring his nervous system to believe in possibility. And change always starts in the mind, but it doesn't stop there. You can't just hope for transformation. You must condition it. He learned early that emotions shape destiny, and that if he could master his emotional state, he could master his life. That's why he trained himself every single day, through movement, through incantations, through visualization, to step into a state of certainty and power. Most people let their emotions be dictated by circumstance. If something good happens, they feel good. If something bad happens, they feel bad. But when you flip the script and decide that you control your emotions, that you can generate energy, confidence, and resilience at will, you no longer wait for life to give you a reason to feel alive. You create it. And one of the biggest breakthroughs came from realizing that the mind operates in patterns. If you can identify the pattern that keeps holding you back, you can break it and replace it with one that drives you forward. That's the process of rewiring, interrupting the old story and conditioning a new one until it becomes your default. He did this relentlessly. Whenever a thought of doubt arose, he replaced it with one of possibility. Whenever fear crept in, he drowned it with action. Action became the antidote to fear, and momentum became the fuel for belief. And rewiring the mind also means raising your standards. Life will give you exactly what you are willing to tolerate. If you tolerate exhaustion, scarcity, and excuses, that's exactly what you'll get. But the moment you raise the standard and declare, I will no longer settle for less than I can be, less than I can do, less than I can give, you force your mind to operate at a new level. That declaration shifts the entire trajectory of your life. And he embodied this principle to the core. He didn't just set goals. He set standards so high they scared him. He demanded more from himself than anyone else could expect. He conditioned his brain to see those standards as non-negotiable, and the mind, once trained, delivered. Think about it. When you lock onto a vision and refuse to lower it, your brain will start finding solutions it never saw before. The mind becomes like a heat-seeking missile, zeroing in on opportunities that align with your standard. And another crucial piece was modeling success. If you want to rewire your brain, you don't just guess at how to do it. You study those who already live at the level you aspire to. He immersed himself in the psychology of the most successful people he could find. He copied their beliefs, their behaviors, their rituals until they became part of him. Success leaves clues, and by absorbing those clues, his mind began to operate as if he was already successful. The nervous system doesn't know the difference between vividly imagined experience and reality. That's why visualization, affirmation, and immersion became so powerful, because they trained his mind to believe before the results showed up. But belief without action is fantasy. So he turned his rewired mind into massive, consistent, disciplined action. Every day was about progress, about taking. One more step, about stretching beyond comfort. The body was trained just as much as the mind, because energy is the foundation of achievement. With a strong body, he had a strong mind. With a strong mind, he had unshakable drive. He didn't wait for inspiration to strike. He created it through motion, through momentum, through pushing past the voice that said, "Not today." And what truly rewired his destiny, though, was shifting from a life of self-focus to a life of service. He realized that fulfillment comes not from achieving goals alone, but from contributing beyond yourself. When your purpose is bigger than you, your fears shrink. When your mission is about impacting lives, you tap into a force of energy and resilience you could never find otherwise. That shift rewires the mind in the most profound way, because it is no longer about what can I get, but rather what can I give. And when you focus on giving, the universe finds a way to give back to you in ways you could never have planned. And every limitation, every obstacle became training ground. Challenges weren't setbacks. They were opportunities to strengthen the wiring of resilience. Pain wasn't the enemy. It was a teacher. He used every ounce of struggle as leverage to drive him higher. That's the ultimate reframe. When your brain is conditioned to see pain as fuel, nothing can stop you. Because while most people run from discomfort, those who rewire their mind run toward it, knowing that growth is on the other side. And this is how dreams that look impossible become inevitable. Not through luck, not through circumstances magically changing, but through a relentless commitment to rewiring the mind every single day until the dream is no longer just a possibility, it's a certainty. When your thoughts align with your vision, when your emotions are mastered, when your standards are raised, when your actions are consistent, when your purpose is bigger than your fear, your life transforms. And it all begins inside with the decision to rewire your mind for the destiny, deep down you were created to live. And every single day was treated like a laboratory of life. Every conversation, every book, every seminar, every moment was a chance to recondition the mind. It wasn't about waiting for the perfect environment or the right opportunity to show up, because the right environment is built, not found. The brain had to be trained to recognize that excuses are lies and that growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in the arena of challenge, in the space where most people hesitate. That's why the decision to rewire the mind was not just a one-time choice, it became a lifestyle. And this lifestyle meant practicing rituals that created peak states. Imagine waking up and instead of drifting into the day, you prime your body, your breath, your emotions so powerfully that you feel unstoppable before the world has even touched you. That was the strategy, conditioning energy before life's demands arrive. Because if you can master your state in the morning, you carry that power into every decision, every interaction, every challenge. The nervous system learns to associate each day with victory instead of survival. And slowly, the identity shifts. You are no longer someone trying to succeed. You are someone who has already claimed success internally, and the external world eventually follows. And one of the greatest realizations along this journey was that identity drives behavior. You can try to change your habits, but if your identity remains the same, you will always snap back to the old patterns. That's why the rewiring process focused on identity first. Who are you really? Who do you decide to be every single day? The moment the brain accepts a new identity, behavior follows naturally. And the identity that was chosen was not of a victim, not of someone limited by circumstances, but of a leader, a creator, a force of nature who shapes life instead of being shaped by it. And the transformation wasn't instant. It required repetition. Neuroscience shows that the brain literally creates new pathways the more you repeat a thought or a behavior. At first, the old pathways of fear, doubt, and hesitation felt stronger, but with persistence, the new patterns became dominant. Like a muscle, certainty grew with training. Like a muscle, confidence expanded through use. And eventually, the brain that once defaulted to scarcity and limitation now defaulted to possibility and power. But rewiring the mind wasn't just about personal gain. The vision was always bigger than self, because the ultimate fuel for transformation is contribution. When you know your dream isn't just about you, when you know it's about lifting others, inspiring others, helping others break free, your mind finds a reservoir of strength you never knew existed. That's what happened here. The drive became about more than achieving personal dreams. It became about being an example, a living demonstration that anyone, no matter how broken their past, can rewire their future. And this is why there was such a relentless obsession with mastery. Not just financial mastery, not just physical mastery, but mastery of the mind and heart. Because when you master yourself, everything else becomes an extension of that mastery. Relationships improve because you show up with presence and energy. Finances improve because you operate with focus and certainty. Health improves because you condition rituals that generate vitality. Life as a whole transforms because the brain has been rewired to expect and create nothing less than excellence. And yet there were moments when everything seemed to fall apart, moments when exhaustion crept in, when doubt tried to claw its way back. And in those moments, the rewiring had to go deeper. Pain had to be reframed as a gift. Every setback had to be turned into leverage. Where others saw failure, he conditioned himself to see feedback. Where others gave up, he found fuel. The question was never, why is this happening to me, but always, how is this happening for me? That single shift in perspective rewires the nervous system to treat adversity as training ground. And in doing so, the impossible becomes manageable, and the manageable becomes a stepping stone to greatness. And he understood that the environment you place yourself in plays a role in the rewiring process. That's why he surrounded himself with people who demanded more, people who believed in growth, people who wouldn't settle, because your brain adapts to the standards of those around you. If you're around people who tolerate mediocrity, your brain will begin to normalize it. But if you're around those who expect greatness, your brain rises to match it. The rewiring process isn't just internal, it's reinforced by the external. And then there was the power of language. Words are not just sounds, they are commands to the nervous system. That's why he became fanatical about the language he used. I can't was replaced with I must. Someday was replaced with now. Failure was replaced with lesson. This shift in language rewires the brain to associate power instead of weakness, to see opportunity instead of obstacles, to feel urgency instead of hesitation. And when your language changes, your actions change and your results transform. And perhaps the most powerful element of all was the creation of rituals that tied emotion to vision. He didn't just write down goals and stare at them passively. He visualized them with intensity. He felt them as though they were already real. He moved his body and spoke his future into existence until his nervous system believed it. The brain doesn't distinguish vividly imagined experiences from reality. That's why athletes rehearse success in their mind before stepping into competition. He did the same for life, rehearsing victory until victory felt inevitable. And every day was another brick laid in the foundation of the dream. Some days were exhausting, some days were exhilarating, but every day counted, and that's the secret: consistency. The rewiring of the brain doesn't happen overnight. It happens in the daily disciplines, the small choices that compound over time. While others looked for shortcuts, he built strength. While others sought quick fixes, he sought lasting transformation. That's why the dream wasn't just achieved, it was sustained. And then the deeper he rewired his mind, the more he realized that the dream itself was never the ultimate goal. The dream was a vehicle. The true reward was who he became in the process: the strength, the resilience, the vision, the love, the unshakable certainty. The brain was no longer the prison of old stories. It had become the architect of a limitless future. And that's the essence of rewiring the mind. It is choosing every day to feed the brain with possibility instead of poison, to condition it with rituals of power instead of routines of weakness, to demand that it serve the life you were created for instead of settling for the life you were handed. And when you do this long enough, consistently enough, passionately enough, your brain becomes a magnet for the very life you once thought was impossible. And the real transformation happens when the mind no longer negotiates with fear. Most people spend their entire lives bargaining with their limitations, giving in to the quiet voice that whispers, "You're not enough, it's too hard, it's too late." But when the wiring shifts, that voice loses its power. Instead of negotiating with fear, you begin commanding your future. You no longer ask, "Can I?" You declare, "I must and I will." That shift is what turns ordinary lives into extraordinary legacies. And think about what happens when you no longer operate from the place of doubt. You stop waiting for permission. You stop asking the world if you're worthy. You stop shrinking to fit the expectations of others. Instead, you begin creating from certainty, from an unshakable conviction that the future you see in your mind is already yours. This level of certainty doesn't come from luck or talent. It comes from conditioning, from daily training of the nervous system until possibility feels natural, until success feels inevitable. And the brain loves patterns, and it loves to stay where it's comfortable. That's why so many people repeat the same cycles year after year, even when they hate the results. But the moment you introduce a new pattern, one of discipline, of vision, of relentless energy, the brain adapts. At first it resists, but with consistency it rewires. Imagine walking through a forest where one path is well worn and another is barely visible. The old path is the doubt, the fear, the hesitation. The new path is the courage, the hunger, the drive. Every time you choose the new path, you make it stronger. Eventually, it becomes the dominant route and the old one fades away. And what made this transformation unstoppable was the decision to eliminate the option of going back. Most people keep escape doors open. They say they want change, but they still cling to their old habits, their old stories, their old excuses. When those doors remain open, the brain always has an exit route when things get difficult. But when you burn the boats, when you decide that there is no way back, the brain has no choice but to adapt to the new standard. That decision creates breakthroughs because when there is no fallback plan, the only direction is forward. And energy became the ultimate weapon in this rewiring process. You can have the best strategies in the world, but if you're exhausted, you won't execute. That's why vitality was trained daily. Movement, breath work, powerful incantations. These weren't random practices. They were tools to command the physiology, to teach the body and brain how to access energy on demand. Because when you're in a peak state, your mind sees solutions others overlook, you take actions others avoid, and you create momentum others can't match. Energy doesn't just change your day, it changes your destiny. And another crucial step was aligning with the power of focus. Whatever you focus on consistently, you move toward. If you focus on problems, you expand problems. If you focus on possibilities, you expand possibilities. The mind is like a magnifying glass. Whatever you place it on grows. That's why he conditioned himself to focus not on what was missing, but on what was possible. Not on what couldn't be controlled, but on what could. This trained the nervous system to look for opportunity, to find the gift inside the struggle, to expect miracles instead of waiting for breakdowns. And gratitude became the anchor. You cannot rewire your brain without gratitude because gratitude shifts your entire state of being. It tells the mind, I already live in abundance. I already have more than enough. I already am blessed. And when you live in that energy, the brain starts seeking more reasons to confirm it. Gratitude rewires the mind from scarcity to abundance, from lack to overflow, from waiting for joy to living it now. That shift is powerful because when you feel abundant before you see the results begin to flow toward you faster than you ever imagined. But the rewiring was not just internal, it translated into massive external action. The dream was not achieved by sitting in meditation alone or repeating affirmations without action. It was achieved by taking bold, decisive steps daily, often when there was no certainty, often when there was no guarantee of success. Each action reinforced the new wiring of the brain, sending the signal that this is who I am now, this is how I live, this is how I create. That's the power of alignment. When thought, emotion, and action operate as one, the results become unstoppable, and the vision grew bigger with time. At first, the dream was simply to break free from limitation, to create a better life. But as the brain rewired, the dream expanded beyond survival into significance. It wasn't enough to just achieve personal success. It had to ripple outward to impact lives, to prove to others that transformation is available to anyone willing to condition their mind. This larger vision fueled even greater drive, because when your mission serves humanity, the universe fuels you with strength you could never generate alone. And adversity became an ally. Where most people see setbacks as signs to quit, he trained himself to see them as preparation for the next level. Every challenge was reframed as a test to strengthen the wiring. Every disappointment was seen as feedback to refine the strategy. The mind was conditioned to understand that life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And when you live from that belief, nothing can break you. Pain becomes fuel, struggle becomes momentum, and obstacles become stepping stones. And rituals cemented the transformation. Morning priming, intense focus, physical training, journaling breakthroughs, celebrating progress. These weren't random habits. They were anchors that kept the nervous system aligned with the vision. Success isn't created by occasional intensity. It's created by consistent rituals that shape your state, your identity, and your actions every single day. And when those rituals compound, they create a mind that no longer drifts toward weakness but is automatically wired for strength. And in perhaps the deepest part of this transformation way is the shift from seeking certainty outside to creating certainty within. Most people wait for external conditions to give them confidence, the right income, the right relationship, the right circumstances. But certainty doesn't come from outside, it is generated within. By conditioning the brain to step into certainty before the results eventually aligned with the certainty. That is the paradox of success. You don't wait to feel confident until you achieve. You feel confident first, and that certainty draws achievement towards you. And over time, this rewiring produced a mind that no longer asked, "Is it possible?" but declared, "It's inevitable." That's the power of transformation. Not that circumstances magically change, but that you change, and when you change, everything else must follow. The world mirrors the patterns of your mind. If your mind is wired for fear, you find reasons to fear. If your mind is wired for greatness, you find opportunities to rise. And every day became another layer of proof, another reinforcement of the new wiring. And as the years passed, the story transformed from one of struggle to one of inspiration, from one of limitation to one of limitless impact. That's what happens when you refuse to accept the wiring you were given and instead build the wiring you need. The brain is plastic, the mind is limitless, and the spirit is unbreakable when aligned with a vision that demands more than comfort. And the shift became even more powerful when the realization hit that the mind is not just a tool for survival, but a mechanism for creation. Most people use their brains like a filing cabinet, storing memories, replaying past pain, and recycling old fears. But when you truly rewire, the brain transforms into a projector. Instead of replaying the past, it begins projecting the future. You stop being trapped by the story of what has been, and you start living from the story of what will be. That's how the nervous system begins to move from reaction to intention, from hesitation to momentum, from limitation to vision. And then with that vision came an obsession with clarity. The brain thrives when it knows where it's going. Without clarity, the mind gets lost in confusion, constantly second-guessing and doubting. But with clarity, the brain becomes like a guided missile. It will not stop until it hits the target. That clarity wasn't just about external goals like income or achievements. It was about who he needed to become, the kind of person who naturally attracts those results. When the mind locks onto an identity and vision that align, every thought, every action, every decision bends toward making it real. But clarity alone isn't enough. You must condition your brain to live in alignment with that clarity every day. That meant creating not just rituals, but rules, standards that became unbreakable, rules that made the dream non-negotiable. The rule was, no matter what, progress must be made today. The rule was, no matter what, energy must be generated today. The rule was, no matter what, fear doesn't dictate the next step. These rules rewired the brain to eliminate hesitation. And when hesitation dies, acceleration begins. And there were countless moments when doubt still tried to creep in because the mind always tests new wiring. The old patterns try to pull you back. The brain whispers, "It's too much, you're not ready, you can't handle it." But instead of surrendering, those thoughts became triggers for action. Every time doubt showed up, it became the cue to double down. Instead of letting fear paralyze him, he used it as a signal to move faster, to act bigger, to stretch further. That's how the mind is trained, by flipping the meaning of the emotions that hold most people hostage. And another key breakthrough was understanding that progress equals happiness. The brain is wired for growth. When you stop growing, you start dying inside. That's why stagnation feels so painful, and why comfort zones eventually suffocate ambition. He rewired his nervous system to link joy, not to arriving at a goal, but to making progress toward it. Every step forward, no matter how small, was celebrated. This trained the mind to associate effort with fulfillment, not just outcomes. And when you love the process as much as the result, you never run out of fuel. And the environment continued to play a massive role in reinforcement. Surrounding himself with people who demanded more wasn't just about accountability, it was about immersing the brain in a new standard of normal. When you see people around you pushing, growing, thriving, your nervous system adapts to keep up. Mediocrity no longer feels acceptable. Excellence becomes the baseline, and the mind, being social in nature, mirrors that excellence until it becomes second nature. And what also became clear was the immense power of language, not just in public, but in the conversations held internally. The words spoken to oneself are the programming codes of the brain. Rewiring required a relentless discipline over inner dialogue. Instead of "I'm tired," the code became "I'm energized." Instead of "this is hard," the code became "this is training me." Instead of "I don't know how," the code became "I'll find a way." Over time, this shift in language rewrote the operating system. The brain stopped arguing for limitations and began fighting for possibilities. And it wasn't just about the words, it was about the intensity with which they were delivered. He understood that emotion is created through motion, through physiology, through the state of the body. So he didn't whisper affirmations lifelessly. He embodied them, shouting them with certainty, moving with conviction, breathing with power. The more vividly and intensely you speak your future, the more your nervous system accepts it as reality. This intensity rewires the brain faster because it connects thought with emotion, and emotion is what cements belief. And as the rewiring deepened, he discovered that contribution was the ultimate amplifier. When the brain is wired to serve only the self, its fuel is limited. But when the mission becomes about impacting others, the brain taps into an endless reservoir of energy. Suddenly, fatigue disappears when you know others are counting on you. Fear shrinks when you realize your courage gives others permission to be brave. Every action becomes more meaningful when it's tied to contribution, and the nervous system thrives when it believes it matters. That sense of significance rewires motivation at the deepest level. But it wasn't just grand contributions, it was the small moments too. A smile, a word of encouragement, an act of kindness. These daily expressions train the brain to see abundance instead of lack, to notice connection instead of isolation. That shift built not only a powerful mind, but also a powerful heart. And when the mind and heart are aligned, there is nothing more unstoppable. And he also recognized the necessity of constantly stretching beyond what felt comfortable. Growth lives on the other side of discomfort. That's why challenges weren't avoided, they were sought out. Speaking when it was terrifying. Acting when there was no guarantee, taking risks when failure seemed imminent. Each time he leaned into discomfort, the brain learned a new lesson. I survive, I grow, I win. Repeated enough, this conditioning rewires the fear response into excitement. What once triggered paralysis now triggered power, and even the darkest moments became leverage. Times of exhaustion, rejection, and setbacks weren't wasted, they were used. He asked himself in those moments, what can this teach me? How can this strengthen me? How can this prepare me for the next level? That reframing turned pain into one of the greatest allies, because pain, when reframed, fuels purpose. The nervous system stopped associating pain with avoidance and began associating it with growth. That single rewiring allowed him to withstand storms that would have crushed most people. And over time, the patterns became automatic. No longer was there a battle each morning to find energy. It was generated instantly. No longer was there a debate about whether to take action. It happened as naturally as breathing. No longer was there fear about the future. The brain was wired to expect victory. This is the power of consistency. What begins as conscious effort eventually becomes unconscious identity. And once it becomes identity, the brain doesn't just act. It lives from that wiring without resistance. And the transformation was not about becoming someone new, but about uncovering who had always been there, buried beneath layers of fear, doubt, and conditioning. Rewiring didn't create a new self. It revealed the truest self, the one capable of greatness, the one who refuses to settle, the one who knows that destiny is created, not inherited. And once that self is awakened, the mind cannot return to its old state. It has tasted possibility. It has tasted freedom. It has tasted power. And it will never again accept less than it knows is possible